Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Speak Smart podcast. Today, we're going to do a deep dive in something that I know a lot of you have asked about: getting better at understanding spoken English.
Yeah.
It's kind of like hitting the gym.
Yeah.
But for your ears.
Right.
Yeah. The more you work those listening muscles, the stronger they get.
That's a great analogy. And strong listening skills, they're not just about understanding the words. They actually lay the foundation for everything else. Speaking, reading, even writing better English.
So it's like a domino effect. So improving your listening skills will then knock over all these other language learning hurdles.
Exactly. When you listen actively, your brain is actually decoding pronunciation, absorbing vocabulary, and figuring out how sentences all fit together. It's a workout for your language processing skills.
Okay, so let's say I'm ready to hit the language gym. What's the first exercise on the agenda?
Consistency is key. Even just 10 to 15 minutes of daily English listening can make a huge difference. And the best part is you can incorporate it into things that you already enjoy.
Okay, so that means if I'm a huge basketball fan, I can listen to English commentary during the games. Or if I'm really into cooking, I can watch cooking shows in English.
Precisely. Find content that you're genuinely interested in. And don't be afraid to use subtitles, especially when you're starting out. You can even begin with subtitles in your native language and then gradually transition over to the English ones.
So it's like having training wheels for your ears. It can help you bridge the gap and get more comfortable with the rhythm of spoken English. But what about those who are ready to ditch the training wheels and really level up their listening comprehension?
That's where active listening techniques come in. One powerful technique is called shadowing. You listen to a short audio clip and then immediately try to repeat it, mimicking the pronunciation, the intonation, even the rhythm of the speaker.
So it's like being an echo, but with a purpose?
Exactly. It might feel a little silly at first, but it forces you to pay attention to the subtleties of the pronunciation, and it helps you really internalize those sounds.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Are there other active listening exercises that we can try?
Absolutely. Dictation is another great one. You listen to an audio clip and you try to write down everything you hear word for word. This really sharpens your ability to recognize individual words and grasp sentence structures, which is helpful for both listening and writing.
So it's like a 2-for-1 workout for our language skills.
Exactly. Another technique I find very effective is listening for specific information. Before you start listening to something like a news report, ask yourself a couple questions. Who is this story about? What happened? Where did it take place? Then as you listen, actively try to find those answers.
So it's like training yourself to be a detective.
That's a great way to put it. And lastly, don't underestimate the power of summarizing. After you listen to something, try to summarize the main points in your own words. You can do this out loud or even in writing. This helps you check your comprehension, practice speaking, and improve your memory.
So it's like putting all the puzzle pieces together after you've listened to something. It helps you see the bigger picture and make sure you're not missing any key details.
Exactly. And the beauty of all of these techniques is that they can be applied to a wide variety of audio material, from podcasts and audiobooks to movies and even music.
Speaking of variety, how important is it to listen to different types of English? After all, we know that there's a lot of accents and dialects out there.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Listening to different accents is crucial for developing well-rounded listening skills. You don't want to limit yourself to just one type of English, like American English or British English. Explore accents from Australia, India, South Africa, anywhere that sparks your interest.
So it's like venturing outside of your comfort zone and exploring a whole world of English sounds.
Exactly. And music is a fantastic way to do this, listening to English songs. It's not just fun, it's a sneaky way to learn vocabulary, get a feel for pronunciation, and let those catchy tunes help you remember phrases.
I've definitely picked up a few interesting phrases from music before. But what about a deeper dive? Are audiobooks good for that immersive listening experience?
Absolutely. Audiobooks are amazing for that immersive experience. You hear fluent English being spoken naturally, and you just get lost in the stories. Start with books that align with your interests and reading level, and then slowly work your way up to more challenging material. You'll be amazed at how much progress you make.
Okay, so music audiobooks, various accents, it sounds like a recipe for success. But let's be honest, the real gold standard is talking with native speakers, right?
You're absolutely right. There's nothing quite like real-life conversation practice. If you have friends or colleagues who speak English, chat with them regularly. If not, there are tons of online language exchange platforms where you can connect with native speakers from all over the world.
That sounds like a fun way to practice listening and speaking in a natural setting. It's like taking those language muscles out for a real-world test drive.
I love that analogy. And remember, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Everyone does. It's an essential part of the learning process. In fact, mistakes are often the best teachers. That's so true. Mistakes are like signposts pointing you in the right direction. But, let's be real, staying motivated on this language learning journey can be tough. Any tips for keeping the momentum going?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, because motivation is like fuel for that language learning engine. And sometimes my tank feels pretty empty. So what strategies can help us stay fueled up?
Well, one of the most effective things you can do is set realistic goals. Instead of aiming for perfect fluency right away, break your learning down into smaller, manageable steps. Maybe commit to 15 minutes of listening every day for a month. Those small victories can really add up and keep you feeling positive about your progress.
I like that small steps leading to big achievements. It's definitely less overwhelming and more sustainable in the long run.
Exactly. Another helpful strategy is to keep a listening journal. Jot down what you listened to each day, how long you listened, and any new words or phrases that you learned. You can even include your thoughts and reflections on your progress. It's a great way to track your growth and stay motivated.
It's like having a personal roadmap of your listening journey. You can see how far you've come and where you want to go next.
And speaking of journeys, finding a study buddy can make a huge difference. Learning with someone else can make it more fun, provide accountability, and give you a sounding board to practice with.
It's like having a built-in cheerleader and accountability partner, someone to celebrate wins with and help you get back on track when you need a boost.
Exactly. And don't forget about the fun factor. Make sure you're enjoying the process. Listen to content that genuinely interests you. True crime podcasts, historical documentaries, whatever makes your ears perk up.
That's such great advice. It's like adding some spice to your language learning recipe. It makes the whole experience more enjoyable and less like a chore. You mentioned before that English comes in many flavors. Formal, informal, different accents, even idioms.
Yeah.
How can we navigate all of that?
That's where things get really interesting. Let's start with formal versus informal English. Understanding the difference can really help you avoid some embarrassing situations.
Oh, I am all ears for that. I've definitely had my fair share of awkward moments when I accidentally used the wrong level of formality. Tell me more.
Formal English is what you would use in professional or academic settings, presentations, business reports, job interviews. Think precise grammar, more complex vocabulary, and avoiding slang.
So it's like dressing up your language for special occasions.
That's a great way to put it. Now, informal English is much more relaxed. It's the language of everyday conversations with friends, family, or even colleagues outside of work. You'll hear contractions, slang, and those tricky idioms we talked about earlier.
It's like letting your hair down and using language in a more casual, comfortable way.
Exactly, and recognizing the difference is important because it helps you interpret the speaker's intent and tone. You get clues about the situation and the relationship between the speakers.
It's like having a secret decoder ring for social interactions.
I love that analogy. To give you an example, imagine you're asking your boss for a raise. Using formal English, you might say, I would like to request a meeting to discuss my compensation. But with a friend, you might say something like, hey, can we chat about my salary sometime?
Okay, that makes perfect sense. The formal version is polite and professional, while the informal one is more direct and casual. So how do we get better at distinguishing between the two?
Exposure is key. Listen to a variety of English content. News reports, academic lectures, business podcasts for formal English, and TV shows, movies, casual conversations for the informal side.
It's like training your ears to recognize the different outfits language wears for different occasions.
Now let's talk about those diverse accents and dialects. Remember, English is a global language spoken with incredible variety across the world. Each region has its own unique accent that influences pronunciation, intonation, even vocabulary.
So someone from London might sound completely different from someone from Texas, even though they're both speaking English.
Absolutely, and these differences can sometimes be quite significant, leading to comprehension challenges, especially if you're only familiar with one or two accents.
I've definitely experienced that. It's like encountering a whole new world within the English language.
Exactly. For example, within the US alone, you have a range of regional accents. From the Southern drawl to the Boston accent, each one adds a unique flavor to the language.
And don't forget about the variety within the UK. Someone from London might sound very different from someone from Scotland or Ireland.
Absolutely. The key takeaway here is that there's no single correct accent in English. It's about understanding and appreciating the incredible diversity of this language.
That's so important to remember. It's all about embracing the richness and beauty of all those different accents and dialects.
Exactly. Now, how can our listeners start getting more comfortable with these different ways of speaking English?
That's a great question. I'm sure our listeners are eager to unlock those listening skills for different accents.
Well, the key is exposure. Actively seek out content from various English-speaking regions. Watch movies and TV shows from different countries, listen to podcasts hosted by people from diverse backgrounds, and explore music from all over the world.
So if I'm struggling to understand a Scottish accent, I could watch a Scottish TV show or listen to a podcast recorded in Scotland.
That's a great strategy. The more you immerse yourself in those sounds, the more your ear will adapt. And start recognizing those nuances. Don't be afraid to use subtitles at first, especially if you're encountering a particularly challenging accent.
Subtitles can be a lifesaver, especially when you're venturing into uncharted accent territory. They can help you connect the spoken words with their written form and crack the code of unfamiliar pronunciations.
Exactly. Over time, as your comprehension improves, you can start weaning yourself off subtitles and challenge yourself to listen without that safety net.
It's like learning to swim with floaties and eventually building the confidence to swim on your own.
Now, are you ready to dive into some specific pronunciation differences that often trip learners up?
Absolutely. I think our listeners would find that super helpful, especially those who are just starting to explore different accents.
One classic example is the pronunciation of the letter R at the end of words. In American English, the R is usually pronounced quite strongly, as in car or teacher. But in many British accents, that R at the end tends to soften or even disappear entirely. So car might sound more like ka.
So that explains why some British accents can sound so different to American ears. What are some other pronunciation quirks we should be aware of?
Another interesting one is the pronunciation of vowel sounds in words like or night. In certain Australian accents, these vowels can sound quite different from their American or British counterparts. Like might sound more like, for example.
Those are such fascinating examples. It really highlights how much variation exists within the English language.
And let's not forget about vocabulary. Different English-speaking countries sometimes use different words for the same thing. For instance, you might say apartment in American English, but in British English, it's flat. Yeah. Or you might say elevator in American English, while in British English, it's lift.
Those vocabulary differences can definitely throw you for a loop.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not expecting them.
They can, but they're also part of what makes English such a rich and exciting language to explore. When you come across a new word, try to make a note of it and add it to your vocabulary bank. Think of it as collecting linguistic souvenirs from your journey through the world of English.
I love that analogy. It's like building a treasure chest of words and expressions from all corners of the English-speaking world. Now, you mentioned idioms earlier. Can you tell us a bit more about those and why they can be so tricky for English learners?
Idioms are phrases that don't mean exactly what the words say literally. They're figurative expressions that have evolved over time and often reflect a culture's unique way of thinking and speaking.
So if someone says, "It's raining cats and dogs," they don't actually mean animals are falling from the sky.
Exactly. It's an idiom that means it's raining heavily. Idioms can be tricky because their meanings aren't always obvious from the individual words. You have to understand the figurative meaning behind the phrase.
That makes sense. It's like trying to solve a riddle or decode a secret message. What's the best way to start tackling these idiomatic puzzles?
The best way to learn idioms is through exposure and context. Listen to native speakers use them in conversations. Read books and articles where they appear, and pay attention to how they're used in different situations.
So it's all about immersing yourself in the language and absorbing those idiomatic expressions naturally.
Exactly. And don't hesitate to ask questions if you hear an idiom you don't understand. Native speakers are usually happy to explain the meaning and help you add those colorful phrases to your English repertoire.
That's great advice. It's all about embracing the playful side of language and expanding your vocabulary of quirky expressions.
Now, are you ready to tackle another layer of complexity in spoken English? Let's talk about understanding different registers of language.
Registers. I'm intrigued. I'm not quite familiar with that term. Can you break it down for us?
Think of registers as the different levels of formality or informality in language. The way you speak to your boss at work is probably quite different from how you chat with your friends at a party, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's a time and a place for certain types of language. I'm definitely more casual and relaxed with my friends.
Exactly. Being aware of these different registers helps you understand the speaker's intent and the social context of the communication. It's like having a built-in social radar that helps you navigate different situations appropriately.
So if I'm listening to a business presentation, I'd expect a more formal register. than if I'm eavesdropping on a conversation between friends at a coffee shop.
Precisely. And being able to distinguish between these registers helps you interpret the meaning more accurately and avoid potential misunderstandings. It's a valuable skill for navigating the nuances of communication.
It's like having a language chameleon that can adapt to different social environments.
I love that. Now, how can our listeners start becoming more attuned to these subtle shifts in register?
That's a great question. I'm sure our listeners are eager to master those social chameleon skills.
One of the best things you can do is pay close attention to the speaker's tone of voice, word choice, and even body language if you can see them. These nonverbal cues can give you valuable clues about the level of formality.
So if someone is using a very formal register, their tone might be more serious and measured, and their word choice might be very precise and professional.
Exactly. And if someone's speaking in a more informal register, their tone might be more relaxed and playful, and their word choice might include more slang and colloquialisms. It's like learning to read between the lines of spoken language.
It's like becoming a language detective, uncovering the hidden clues and nuances in every conversation.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the more you expose yourself to different types of spoken English, the more adept you'll become at recognizing and understanding these subtle shifts in register. It's like fine-tuning your language antenna to pick up on all the subtle signals.
This has been incredibly insightful. I think our listeners will find these tips on formal versus informal language, accents, dialects, idioms, and registers incredibly helpful for improving their listening comprehension. It's like giving them a toolkit for unlocking the secrets of spoken English.
Exactly. It's all about embracing the richness and complexity of the English language and training your ears to appreciate all its wonderful nuances.
Speaking of richness and complexity, I think it's time we dive into the world of technology and explore how online resources can become powerful allies on this language learning journey. Technology is like having a superpower for language learners these days. So where should our listeners start? What are some must-have resources for taking their English listening to the next level?
Well, you're absolutely right. We're living in a golden age for language learning. Let's start with those pocket-sized powerhouses. Language learning apps like Duolingo, Babbel, and Rosetta Stone offer a fantastic mix of listening exercises, vocabulary builders, and grammar lessons, all wrapped up in a fun game-like format.
I've heard those apps can be really addictive in a good way. They make learning feel less like work and more like a game.
Exactly, and they often adapt to your pace and preferences so you're not overwhelmed. Now, let's move on to another digital treasure trove, YouTube.
YouTube, the land of endless possibilities. I spend way too much time there, but I bet I could be using it to boost my English listening.
You definitely can. YouTube is a goldmine of English content. You've got everything from TED Talks and documentaries to vlogs, music videos, tutorials, you name it. And the best part, many videos offer subtitles.
Subtitles are like a secret weapon for language learners. I love that you can start with subtitles in your native language and gradually transition to English ones as you get more comfortable.
It's a great strategy for building confidence and independence. Now, let's talk about a format that's perfect for those on-the-go moments podcasts. They're like portable language lessons you can take anywhere.
I'm a huge podcast fan. They're perfect for my commute walks, even doing chores. It's like having a personal radio show filled with interesting conversations and stories.
Podcasts are a fantastic way to immerse yourself in natural English conversations. You get exposed to different accents, speaking styles, and topics that genuinely interest you. And speaking of radio, don't underestimate the power of tuning into online radio stations.
I hadn't thought about that you could listen to live broadcasts from English-speaking countries all over the world. It's like having a direct line to different cultures and conversations.
Exactly. It helps you develop a feel for the natural flow of spoken English in different contexts. Now, let's talk about a resource that combines reading and listening beautifully. Audiobooks.
I love curling up with a good audiobook.
Yeah.
It's like having a professional storyteller bring the words to life, and I often pick up new vocabulary and expressions I wouldn't have noticed just by reading.
Audiobooks are a fantastic way to immerse yourself in stories and improve your listening comprehension. You can often adjust the narration speed to match your comfort level, and if you have the physical book, you can follow along with the text. It's like having a built-in reading coach.
Those are great tips.
Yeah.
Now, what about practicing those speaking skills alongside listening? Are there any online resources that can help with that?
Absolutely. Language exchange platforms are a fantastic way to connect with native English speakers from around the world who are learning your language.
It's like a global language swap. You get to learn from each other and make new friends across cultures.
Exactly. Websites and apps like Tandem, HelloTalk, and Speaky let you find language partners and chat via text, voice calls, or even video calls. It's a wonderful way to practice listening and speaking in a real-world setting and get feedback on your progress.
That sounds amazing. I love that technology makes it so easy to connect with people from all over the world. It's like breaking down those geographical barriers to language learning.
And let's not forget about the incredible world of online courses and MOOCs, massive open online courses.
MOOCs. I've heard that term before, but I'm not quite sure what they are.
MOOCs are online courses offered by universities and educational institutions worldwide, often covering a wide range of subjects. Many are taught in English and include video lectures, interactive exercises, and discussion forums.
So you can learn about a topic you're passionate about and boost your English listening skills at the same time. What a fantastic way to combine learning and personal interests.
Exactly. It's a great way to make language learning more meaningful and engaging. Now, let's talk about a tech tool that's often overlooked for pronunciation practice, speech recognition software, like Google Voice typing or the speech-to-text features on your smartphone.
I use those all the time, but I never thought of them for language practice. How would that work?
It's simple, just speak aloud in English, and the software tries to transcribe what you're saying. If it struggles to understand you, it might indicate that your pronunciation needs a bit of work.
So it's like having a personal pronunciation coach in your pocket.
You can even use voice assistants like Siri or Google Assistant to practice listening and responding to questions in English. It's a fun and effortless way to sneak in some extra practice throughout your day.
Those are great tips. It's amazing how everyday technology can be repurposed for language learning. Are there any other online communities or resources you'd recommend for our listeners?
Don't underestimate the power of online communities and forums. Websites like Reddit, Quora, and various language learning forums have vibrant communities of English learners and native speakers eager to help you. Can ask questions, share tips, find study buddies, and get support from people who understand your journey.
It's like having a global network of language learning cheerleaders right at your fingertips.
Exactly. And these communities can be incredibly motivating and inspiring. And finally, let's not forget about the exciting world of virtual reality, VR, and immersive language learning.
VR for language learning. That sounds futuristic. Tell me more.
As VR technology becomes more accessible, it's opening up incredible possibilities for language learners. Apps like Monly VR and AltSpace VR allow you to practice English in virtual environments where you can interact with virtual characters, explore different scenarios, and even participate in realistic conversations.
Wow. It's like stepping into a virtual English-speaking world. I can see how that would be so much more engaging than traditional textbook learning.
Exactly. It's a fantastic way to practice your listening and speaking skills in a fun and immersive way, even if you can't physically travel to an English-speaking country. So as you can see, the digital world is brimming with resources to help you on your English learning adventure.
This has been an incredible journey through the world of English listening resources. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners are feeling inspired and empowered to start exploring these amazing tools.
I hope so. Remember, the key is to find what works best for you. Experiment, have fun, and make language learning a joyful part of your life. The possibilities are endless.
That's such great advice. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today and for opening our eyes to all these incredible resources.
It's been my pleasure. I'm always thrilled to connect with fellow language enthusiasts and help make the learning journey more engaging and fulfilling.
And to all our listeners out there, we hope you feel inspired to dive into the world of English listening with renewed enthusiasm and a toolbox full of amazing resources. Remember, the more you listen, the more you understand, and the more you'll enjoy the journey of becoming a confident and fluent English speaker. Keep practicing, keep listening, and keep exploring the beautiful world of the English language. Thank you for listening to the Speak Smart podcast.